Hello, friends and adventurers. Our podcast has been supported for months now by Misty Mountain Gaming, and they're now rewarding you, our listeners, with savings on all their fine D&D products such as metal dice, stone dice, glass dice, miniatures, adventures, dice trays, and more. You can use the code TWINS10, that's TWINS10, to save 10% on all purchases made in their online store at mistymountaingaming.com. Every code redeemed helps support Steven and I, and encourages us to make more and better content for you. So be sure to use code TWINS10 whenever you're buying premium Dungeons & Dragons dice and gear from our good friends at mistymountaingaming.com. Okay, on with the show. Welcome back, friends and adventurers, to another episode of Bardic Twinspiration, a topical podcast where my brother and I sit down and talk Dungeons & Dragons.
And sometimes we talk better than others.
I'm the D&D wannabe. My name is Rob.
And I'm Steven. Thank you again for joining us as we continue to go through this One D&D playtest packet featuring the expert classes. We've already discussed each of the expert classes and the subclass that was included for our perusal, and now we are moving on to the next section that we've been provided with, the new feats for One D&D.
I can feel the electricity coming through the webcam. I know we talked before in a previous episode about just how much feats mean to you, how much you are fascinated by them, and so I know you've been looking forward to this one since this PDF came out.
Oh boy, yes, I do like me some feats. This is possibly the part that I've been most interested in as we go through this packet, because the changes to the bard are going to make a difference to me when I play a bard. The changes to the ranger and the rogue are going to make a difference to me when I play a ranger or a rogue. The changes to the feats are going to be impactful to me no matter what class I'm playing every time I play One D&D.
Well, let's not waste any time. So, feats have been fundamentally changed as far as who can take them, when they can take them, and in some cases, how often. A few feats in 5th edition had prerequisites that had to be met before you could take them, and now, I feel like every feat has a prerequisite, even if it's just what level you have access to it.
Well, other than the feats that are available to all classes at first level, that is very much the case.
Yeah, I guess being accessible at first level isn't much of a prerequisite, is it? I guess I said that poorly.
Hey, you still have to be playing D&D. That's kind of a prerequisite, I guess. But even some of the first level feats do have a couple of prerequisites, and we'll be going over some of those today. Most of these prerequisites have to do with whether or not you can cast spells and how you gained that ability, whether or not you can wield martial weapons, and whether or not you belong to a certain class group, or just what level you've achieved.
So as we're going through all of these feats, we're going to be making note of who these are available to, when they are available to them, and that's a consideration that is going to come up a lot more often, in fact, almost every time, which is something we're not used to from our 5th edition experience.
Right, and if a feat is repeatable, we'll just go ahead and make a note of that fact, because most feats are not, so we're not going to tell you every time a feat is not repeatable. It would be too much extra unnecessary editing for Rob.
With that said, jump on down to page 16 of the PDF that is linked down in the description of this podcast episode and follow along as we get into the meat of it. Starting off with the ability score improvement feat. Now, if you listen to our last few episodes here on the podcast, you know that ability score improvements are feats now. And feats are no longer an optional rule. So this is what you're doing if you want to improve those all-important ability scores.
Obviously, this is a repeatable feat. It becomes available at 4th level, and it allows you to increase 2 ability scores by 1 or 1 ability score by 2. You still can't increase any ability scores above 20. Pretty straightforward. It's exactly how you would expect it to be in 5th edition, now just translated over into being a feat. Functionally, it works the exact same way as you'd expect.
Interestingly, with One D&D's allowance of first level feats that were highlighted in the previous playtest material, the Character Origins playtest material. They did tack on that 4th level requirement to this, so you can't just come out the gate swinging with an ability score improvement feat. They want you to take something a little more character defining and a little less number crunching.
Right. In 5th edition, this option wouldn't have been on the table for you until 4th level because they differentiated between feats and ability score improvements. While there were options that would allow you to get feats at level 1, this was never on the table, and that prerequisite of being a 4th level feat, make sure that that is still not possible even with all the feats you're being showered with in 1D&D.
I mean, basically nothing's changed. Nothing needed to change. I liked it. I still like it, even though it's a feat. And this is the least we will talk about any feat going forward. Enjoy that brevity while you may.
Moving on from that brief covering of the ability score improvement feat, we now come to the actor feat. Historically, one of Rob's favorite feats in 5th edition, so we'll see how he feels about this one in the 1D&D version. Actor is currently a 4th level feat, whereas previously it had no level restrictions, and it also now comes with a prerequisite of having a charisma of 13 or higher. As in 5th edition, the first part of this feat is that it gives you a +1 to your charisma up to a maximum of 20. That still holds true in 1D&D.
Actually, this is going to be a pretty common thread throughout the 4th level feats here in the 1D&D playtest document.
Yes, it is.
Actor already had it back in 5e because it was a leader. It was taking us in the correct direction from day one. But a lot of other feats are going to be following its shining example going forward as we make our way down this document.
Which is one of the things that I am most excited about. I hate the term half feat, but I love how almost all of the feats that we're going to be covering are half feats. I realize I'm making the air quotes and no one can see that. Sometimes I forget this is a podcast.
What, you think one day we'll ever release a video of this?
Moving on. As we very much need to impersonation, the next feature of the actor feat. Can I just say how I like that every bullet point is no longer just a bullet point, but it has a name associated with it?
Okay, if you weren't going to say something about that, I was going to, because I like that they're bullet points, but now you can say, I'm using the mimicry feature from my actor feat instead of, look at bullet point number 3.
Yeah, I really like how they now have keywords to refer to certain aspects of these feats.
It'll make it a lot easier to search in a PDF.
Right. So then the next one that we're going to discuss is the second bullet point, the second feature of the actor feat, which is called impersonation. In 5th edition, this previously unnamed feature would give you advantage on deception and performance checks when trying to pass yourself off as a different person. In 1D&D, it works similarly, except that it no longer allows you to make deception checks. It is now stated that performance is the skill that you will be using in order to pass yourself off as a different person.
And you know what? I think a lot of dungeon masters were already clued into this, and maybe I was just slow on the uptake. But having performance be the skill to convincingly portray another person makes good sense, and it gives that performance skill a venue outside of stagecraft that is much needed. Deception is fine on its own, and deception is useful in other areas without having to come and play on performance's playground. So I like this shift. What do you think?
I agree. You know, when I think of an actor like on Broadway or in a movie, I don't usually think of someone who is being deceitful. I usually think of someone who is performing. So while I have allowed deception checks, you know, in the games that I've run in the past in order to make use of this feat, I'm very happy to move forward with it being specified that it is only a performance check, because that makes the best sense to me.
It also casually mentions in the first few words there that you need to be disguised to assist your performance check. In order to have advantage on this check, you gotta look like the person you're pretending to be. You can't just look like yourself and sound and act different.
And you are trying to pass yourself off as a different person, right? This is the impersonation aspect of the actor feat. There's another aspect, which is the mimicry aspect, which we're going to come to in a second. But in order to actually impersonate someone, you have to not only act like them, you also have to look like them. This is just something that makes sense. And it was, I believe, probably intended and implied in the 5e version, but it was not stated, so now it is more clear.
Did you also notice that you can be disguised as a fictional person and still have advantage on the performance check? I think that's fun. You go up into a casino's Bond, James Bond, and people might buy it.
Oh, you mean like a specific fictional person? I thought you were just pretending to be royalty or something like that. Like, if you're dressed as a royal, you can pretend to be a royal. Or I'm trying to think of whoever the Fox Robin Hood pretended to be for the archery contest. That would be something that you could do using the actor feat, as long as you had a disguise to go along with it, and as long as you made the associated performance check, performance only.
So, I mean, it's technically advantage on one fewer thing, and it does add the caveat of the disguise, but it's giving me the same ability. It's allowing me to do what I was going to do anyway, and it is allowing me to be equally good at it thus far. Let's move on to that final feature, that mimicry aspect of the feat.
And this is another one where the flavor matches the 5e version exactly. You are mimicking the sounds of another person or another creature. And in order to do that, you have to listen to the genuine article for at least 1 minute, otherwise you don't have a sufficient point of reference. Where this differs from the 5e version is how you achieve that, in a way that we're going to see a lot more as we move into the glossary, or really as we talked about the rogue, because the rogue pretty much takes you through the glossary by itself, is that in One D&D, your ability to do things is going to be determined much more by a set DC than by contesting other creatures. So like if you want to hide, it's a DC 15 stealth check, and that will make you hidden from anyone you want to be hidden from. And in very much the same way, the actor feat will now ask you to make a DC 15 performance check, and if you succeed, you will convincingly mimic the creature that you would like to mimic. Not only that, that convincing performance that you have made by beating that DC 15 check will last for a full hour.
So here it gets a little more chintzy than the old actor feat, in my opinion. It codifies how long you can make the sound. It codifies the performance check that you must make to be able to even attempt this. And if the speech that you are mimicking is not coming from a person, you can't benefit from the impersonation aspect of the feat while trying to achieve the mimicry aspect of the feat. Still, if you're taking this feat, if you're even interested in it, you're probably someone who is likely to succeed in it, and you're probably basing your character around this sort of theme. And so I don't think it's going to be that hard to pull off. Being able to do it for an hour is great. Not inviting a check to see whether or not someone believes that the thing making this sound is the real deal or not is a pretty heavy buff, though. Like I've talked about many times, I forget if I've mentioned it on the podcast, illusion magic is so powerful because people just accept it as fact unless they have a reason not to. And now, thanks to this mimicry trait, if someone hears it, they are convinced of its veracity, of whatever you are portraying actually being there. That's a pretty big deal. At 4th level, being able to convince anyone of anything with the DC 15 check is pretty up there.
Personally, I'm a big fan of this change. Not only because it is much simpler to understand, you make one roll and determine whether or not you can pass off as that person for the coming hour, but also because I wasn't a really big fan of contested rolls. Now, I get that it's a little bit more immersive to be checking how well you do something against how well they do something, as previously determined by your deception check versus their insight check. But just from a player or a DM perspective, it's a lot cleaner to make one roll and go with that result for the next in-game hour than it is for you to have to re-roll that check every time you run into someone new.
I'm imagining someone mimicking the sound of a dragon roaring.
Okay.
To terrify people or to prevent them from coming towards us. A DC 15 check is preventing them from wanting to come around the next corner and face a dragon, or encouraging them to run away from it. And I think the only thing that balances that idea out is that you have to be close enough to hear a dragon roar for a solid minute to be able to gain that ability.
Well, for a particularly inventive player who was built to tackle social encounters, the actor feat has always been strong. And now it is at least that strong, if not stronger. You can still take advantage of mimicry and impersonation at the same time, provided you have heard the target you would like to impersonate. I remember several episodes back you were talking about being a changeling with the actor feat, listening to the king talk, and then disguising yourself as the king and impersonating them, and you can do that for as long as you want, as long as you could keep succeeding on those checks. And that is very much still on the table. It's just a lot cleaner. It's just a lot simpler. Depending on who you're up against, dare I say easier? I will note that Insight is very rarely a skill that any NPC or monster is proficient in. So maybe actually having it set at a DC 15 is arguably harder to succeed at than beating the weak wisdom scores of so many monster stat blocks. But while the mechanics have changed, the intent and the use of the actor feat, in my opinion, very much remains the same.
I agree, and I think this is going to be a very popular feat, as it was in 5th edition, for bards to take, or really any member of this expert group who can reliably pull this off every time that they attempt it, or at least have very good odds to do so. Even a ranger, who would probably be arguably the least likely to have a high charisma score, could become very convincing and very adept at using this feat, mimicking animal sounds and other things that they've heard out in the wild. As ever, it is still rife with opportunity if handled correctly.
This is another one of those things where if you're a rogue with expertise and you stay a rogue until you get reliable talent, the fact that you can unerringly mimic anyone that you have heard for 1 minute becomes insane, especially if it's like, say, a changeling rogue. I'm going to have to do it at some point.
Oh, if you think we're not going to have a party of changeling rogues just toppling the political infrastructure in some game, I don't know what you're smoking.
I can just see a DM with their head in their hand saying, "This is my game now." We went from being adventurers to having a kingdom management simulator.
I can still do a full episode of just actor feat possibilities, so unless you want to commit to that, I suggest we move on.
Okay. Hopefully the actor is the one that we're going to spend the longest time talking about. There we have the shortest one and the longest one back to back. Moving on to the athlete feat. This is another 4th level feat, and it requires that you have at least a 13 or higher in either your strength, dexterity, or constitution.
One of those physical attributes. And the first aspect of this feat is that you can get a +1 to any of those same ability scores. This is a notable improvement from 5th edition, where it would only give you your choice between strength or dexterity.
And here at Bardic Twinspiration, we always like having more options, so no complaints there. Moving on to the next feature called Climb Speed, you gain a climb speed equal to your movement speed. Probably the most boringly named and the most straightforward of all the different features we're going to cover today. This is functionally the same as the ability that it gave you in 5th edition, where it stated that climbing doesn't cost you extra movement. The only way that really differentiates one between the other is just the new rules for climbing in general.
It's nice that they have put that in the player's hands, more so than the dungeon masters, because previously when a player wanted to climb, it was up to the dungeon master to tell them how much movement it took and whether it was possible or not. Now you just have a climb speed, and you climb the same as one would walk. It's less management, it's less questions, it's less time at the table to do what you wanted to do in the first place, even though it is, as you said, functionally the same.
I love it when they clean stuff up. The next feature is Hop Up, which says when you are prone, you can stand back up with only 5 feet of movement. This is exactly the same as it was in 5th edition. You do your little Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan hop up, and you're ready to fight again. And the final feature that we have is Jumping, which simply gives you advantage on any check you make to take the jump action. Have we covered jump actions yet? I don't think so, but we're going to get to it in our glossary episode.
I think we mentioned it briefly. Anyway, the intent is still the same. With the athlete feat, you jump farther than people that don't have the athlete feat. And since they've changed the way the jumping works, they changed it to giving you advantage on a check, and the total number that you roll after rolling at advantage will be the number of feet that you jump. It's simpler. We like simple.
All told, is it good enough for me to want to take it? Probably not, especially as good as some of these other feats have gotten. But I would still say that it is empirically better than its 5e version. Things are improving.
We already covered how the thief is going to get a climb speed and how the ranger is going to get a climb speed. And I wonder if that's going to come up in other classes. I think a lot of the classes and a lot of the character archetypes that I am interested in playing that want a climb speed will probably be getting them anyway. So that's not going to be the reason to take this feat, and if that's not the reason, I don't know what is. Neither of the other two are attractive enough to lure me in.
Okay, we've come to the Charger feat, previously stated as one of the worst feats in 5th edition. They have changed it a lot, which is good, because it needed some big changes.
Let's start with the easy stuff. Still a 4th level feat, which means you can't take it at 1st level. Also, it comes with an ability score increase that the old Charger feat didn't, because all 4th level feats come with an ability score increase, this time to the tune of your strength or dexterity. And it does have a prerequisite that you must be proficient with a martial weapon in order to take this feat.
That's kind of weird, isn't it? It seems like you could rush someone with a club just as well as you could rush them with a maul, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't say you have to be wielding a martial weapon. It says you have to be proficient with one. Yet, it doesn't say you must be from the warrior group, and you must be from the expert group. So I guess it's trying to leave that open. This prerequisite, it's going to appear as we continue to go down through this document, and I'm really wondering who they're trying to include and exclude by making this specific prerequisite. Do you know what I mean? Why this instead of something else?
Right. Yeah, this is just an odd one from a flavor perspective for me. I don't know why that exists there. I don't feel like my martial training will make me any better at charging specifically. So anyway, I don't want to quibble because the feat has just gotten so much better overall that doesn't really bother me too much.
Speaking of which, let's not bother discussing how bad the old feat was, because it was so bad.
You want to hear how bad the Charger feat was? Go back and listen to our feat episode.
While they're still called the same thing, and while they still want to work in the same way, they're trying to achieve the same goal, this one just does it so much better. Let's just focus on what this one gives you the opportunity to do.
The first feature is called Improved Dash, and it allows your dash action to increase by 10 feet. Not your whole movement speed, only when you take the dash action.
Which, interesting. That kind of invites the rogue to take this, because they can take the dash action as a bonus action. So that's neat. Rogues are proficient with a martial weapon, right? Didn't they get rapiers or something? Or did they not?
Yes, they are proficient in martial weapons that have the finesse property, so this would work for them.
That's nice. They left the door slightly ajar for the rogue to get in. That's cool.
Rogues normally don't need the door to be ajar to get in. You know, it's a lock-picking joke.
I got it.
Anyway, moving on to the next section of the feat, we have Charge Attack. Now, Charge Attack is very different from how it used to work in 5e. Simply put, when you hit with an attack action, after moving 10 feet in a straight line, one of your hits can either deal an extra 1d8 damage or push the target 10 feet. If the target is one size larger than you or less, you can do this once per turn. Interesting things about this. 1, moving 10 feet in a straight line does not have to be toward your enemy anymore. Also, it doesn't specify that it has to be a melee attack. So both of those are weird. You could be a rogue who runs away and shoots back with your crossbow and still push them back per the Charger feat.
Yeah, that's weird.
Isn't it, though? All the more reason for rogues to take this, honestly.
The thing is, even with this weird conflux of words that they have assembled here, it functions better than the old one. Because now, when you charge, ideally at your enemy, you can either use that momentum to deal a little more damage with your weapon, or to body the creature and shove them away, farther away than a normal shove coming off of an unarmed strike. So, it works. I mean, in ways perhaps not intended, but it definitely works as intended. So, yeah, way better than what we got in 5e.
Right, and in the 5th edition version, there was this interesting little version where if you wanted to move the creature away, you had to shove. And shove required a contested check to succeed. And this one just takes that right out, makes it cleaner, makes it more consistent, and generally makes it better. Honestly, Charger was already better. Once it was turned into a 4th level half feat, that was the only change that was needed to make it empirically better. But both of these other 2 add-ons have further improved it.
Disagree with what you said before the improving part. The improving part is true. The best part about this is it doesn't require you to use your dash action to function. It just requires you to make an attack and use your movement in a certain way. Remember, the old Charger feat didn't let you get to take advantage of extra attacks. This one does. That is most of what we needed.
The old Charger feat, really bad. The new Charger feat, pretty good. Pretty good.
Leaving the charge attack in the dust, we come to the crossbow expert feat. Now, this was one of my favorite ones to take back in 5e because this was the only feat that allowed me to make ranged weapon attacks at melee range without suffering disadvantage. I felt obliged to take this no matter what ranged weapon attack character I was playing. This one has not lost that property, but it has been shared with some other feats as we go down the list, so it's leaving my list of must-haves. But anyway, it's a 4th level feat. You get your ability score increase, as all 4th level feats do, this time specifically to your dexterity, and just like the feat before it, it requires proficiency with a martial weapon.
After that, we come to some of its iconic features, or at least the One D&D version of them. First off is the ability to ignore the loading property of crossbows, which is exactly the same way that it worked in 5th edition. Moving on from there, we come to firing in melee, which is the aforementioned ability that Rob was just speaking of, where you were allowed to ignore the disadvantage that would normally be applied if you were making attack rolls with ranged weapons in melee with an enemy. However, the 1D&D version specifies what the 5e version did not, that this only applies when you're wielding crossbows.
Right. This makes the crossbow expert feat a feat for people who wish to be an expert with crossbows. Crazy, right? I mean, it is
weird.
Definitely a step in the direction of the thematic, and appropriately so, I feel. I will say, as far as the ignoring the loading property, used to be, in 5th edition, it ignored the loading property of crossbows with which you were proficient. Now it doesn't care. You just ignore them. Doesn't matter if you're proficient or not, you know how to reload them quickly.
How did I miss that? Good point. Okay, moving on to the final feature of the crossbow expert feat, we come to dual wielding. Now, the previous version, back in 5e, granted the ability to fire an offhand crossbow as a bonus action. However, offhand attacks now come standard in 1D&D, provided that both weapons are light, of course. That's just how the light weapon property works now. They don't want you to miss out on still getting an additional benefit, so now the feat allows that if your offhand weapon is a light crossbow, you can now add your dexterity mod to the damage, which normally would not be allowed with any offhand attack.
I notice 2 things about that jump out at me. First of all, still, who gets hand crossbows? Because rogues didn't get it, and bards didn't get it.
I am very curious to see how that shakes out. Maybe that's the reason to take martial weapon proficiency.
Again, I really wonder who this last one is for. Also, it says that you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the extra attack. It doesn't say your dexterity modifier. Is there a crossbow out there that is strength-powered? I don't know. It's weird that they left that open, isn't it?
It is. My current understanding of how the rules work, because they haven't restated this from how it worked in 5th edition, is that all ranged weapons attacks are going to be made with your dexterity, and that is going to be the applicable ability score to be applied here. However, you're right, the wording does not specify as such. So maybe they're trying to leave things a little bit more open-ended for in the future. I do feel like 1D&D future-proofs itself a lot, for which I'm actually grateful, because it makes things a lot easier down the road.
It does. It's also, so far, 1D&D has been very specific when it has an opportunity to be specific, such as with the performance checks in the actor feat, where it tells you exactly what you are doing and what you are applying and how you are accomplishing something. So, I don't know, it's starting to stand out more than it did in 5e when they leave something vague.
You know, notably, this last feature here, this dual-wielding feature, is also granted to you by the 2-weapon fighting style, which will be covered later on. It's just interesting to me that there is a little bit of overlap, because normally when you're looking at feats, it allows you to get an ability that you would not be able to replicate by any other means. However, the 2-weapon fighting style seems to do the last part of crossbow expert by itself. Granted, it's not giving you all these other features.
There is a lot of precedent in 5th edition as well as 1D&D for getting access to something earlier or without investing too heavily in a class or investing in a particular feat or fighting style or what have you. So, let's face it, the expert class feature is now shared multiple times between 3 different classes. So it's not too surprising to me to see that there is some overlap between different feats. You don't have to take both. Apparently there's no point in taking both. And either way, even if you did take the 2-weapon fighting style at first level with the idea of taking this at a later level, there's still reasons to take this feat. So is it interesting? Yes. Is it surprising? Not so much. Is it still good? Yes.
Well, I guess that does make a certain sense because this would allow you to take, say, the archery fighting style and then still be able to unlock that benefit when you take the crossbow expert feat.
Now you're thinking with portals.
So actually maybe that overlap will come in handy. Yeah, so it's kind of like getting a discount fighting style if you use it in the specific way outlined here in the feat. So never mind, I like that. Moving on to our next feat, we have Defensive Duelist. This is another 4th level feat. Its prerequisite is that you have a dexterity of 13 or higher, and its ability score increase is that it will give you a +1 to said dexterity.
This one is the feat from 5th edition. Other than the fact that you get the ability score increase, which is just coming standard at this point, and I probably won't bring it up as a difference from this point on when comparing it to the 5th edition versions, this one does the same thing. They express it differently in a more understandable language, but functionally, this works the same as it does in 5e. You use a finesse weapon, someone tries to hit you, you use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, and potentially cause that attack to miss. The only real difference that Steve pointed out to me, because I missed it initially, is that you must be proficient in the finesse weapon that you are wielding in 5th edition. Not so much here. Any Joe Schmo can grab a finesse weapon, hold it in their hand, take this feat, and be slightly harder to hit. It's odd.
It isn't that weird?
I mean, but you're probably not taking this feat if you are not going to be holding that weapon all the time. So, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, that's true.
These feats are not idiot-proofed now. I guess that's the thing.
It's a weird thing you can do that no one ever will. Oh, man. All right, moving on from Defensive Duelist, we get to one of Rob's favorite feats from 5th edition, the Dual Wielder feat. Now a 4th level feat, which requires proficiency with any martial weapon and allows you to gain an ability score increase to your strength or dexterity, which is quite possibly the best change about this feat moving to 6th edition. Because actually, after this, things kind of get marginally worse than they were in 5th edition. But you have this boon to kind of balance it out. And I think it does/almost does. The first major change we're seeing after this is that you no longer get a +1 to your AC when wielding 2 weapons.
Losing the bump to your armor class does hurt. Because that was one of the things that made it so appealing to me in the first place is, do I wield a shield or do I get to deal more damage? Well, I kind of get half of a shield by wielding 2 weapons that can hurt people, so is there really even a choice? Of course you go with the dual wielding. Now that that's gone, I love that I'm getting a little ability score bump, but frankly I'd rather have that bump to my armor class back.
As would I, because that +1 to your dexterity, again, should you choose to put it in dexterity, might give you a +1 to your armor class if you were sitting on an odd ability score, and if your armor allows you to take advantage of an increased dexterity. But if you took that +1 to your strength, your AC is going to change not at all. It's kind of situational whether or not that dexterity increase is going to get you additional armor class, and if you took that increase to strength, it's not going to increase at all.
Fortunately, they left the quick draw ability mostly alone. You still get to draw or stow 2 weapons on your turn when you would normally only be able to do 1.
And now we come to the final aspect of the dual wielder feat, which is now called enhanced dual wielding. This states that you can now treat all non-two-handed weapons as light weapons if you are wielding a light weapon in the other hand. The 5th edition version of this feat allowed you to dual wield any non-two-handed weapons.
Melee weapons.
Oh, sorry, yes. Non-two-handed melee weapons. And the 6th edition version still grants you that in one hand, while specifying that your other hand must still have a light weapon. So while the average damage for the 5th edition version and the 6th edition version is not going to be significant, it's going to be pretty negligible, it did go down by virtue of limiting those options.
The players in my uncle's 5th edition game for the Tomb of Annihilation talked about this kind of at length on our old forums, about how fighting with a rapier and a parrying dagger was such an established mode of combat, especially in Hollywood, and it's something that we kind of want to emulate in D&D. But there's not a great way of doing that because a rapier isn't a light weapon, and you would have had to take in the old dual wielder feat to be able to make use of it, and then it feels like you are cheating yourself by not wielding 2 rapiers and wielding 2 D8 instead of a D8 and a D4.
Right.
Even though a parrying dagger, I mean, you could argue maybe that should be akin to a short sword, maybe get a D6. Now you can have that flavor. Now that is what you are being pushed toward with this feat, rather than wielding 2 great axes, which is what we typically saw when someone took the dual wielder feat, or 2 warhammers, or 2 longswords, 2 versatile weapons, 1 in each hand.
I think that this is one of those changes that is being made to preserve realism, because dual wielding longswords effectively in combat is really hard.
We should preserve realism in the game with dragons and magic.
Oh, and that's the problem, because I feel like, a barbarian going in swinging 2 battle axes is very just, Conan the Barbarian, right? It is a very typical, iconic fantasy. My first 5th edition character was a paladin that dual wielded longswords, and I had a lot of fun with him. I know that mechanically it's not going to make a big difference in the amount of damage that I can deal per turn, but I do feel like I miss that. Just on a personal, emotional level, I miss that.
Maybe that'll be the 8th level version of the dual wielder feat that they're going to release in the next one. Who knows? Maybe they might do something like that. We don't know. That is a fantasy, just like having the parrying dagger and the rapier is, and I would be surprised if they didn't leave room for that somewhere. Maybe it's going to be a feature of the barbarian class.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Speaking of barbarians, those sons of guns are durable, and that's the name of our next feat. Durable, ladies and gentlemen. It is a 4th level feat, so you must be 4th level to get it. It is a 4th level feat, so you get an ability score increase this time to your constitution, and you must have a constitution of 13 or higher before you can think about taking this feat, sir. And then the new stuff comes in.
Guys, Durable got a total revamp and is actually worth taking now. I'm actually kind of excited about this one. This is one of the first feats that's really excited me.
First thing you get, and this is a big thing, is advantage on death saves.
Ladies and gentlemen, we could have taken that and gone home.
If you are attached to your character and you don't want to kiss them goodbye, this is so much better than the old stupid tough feat for keeping your character in the game. Who cares if they got hit points? They're way less likely to die. Unless you are up against some gnoll who's going to start nibbling on your neck the moment you go down, you are probably going to survive the encounter, which may mean that your allies are less likely to heal you because you're going to be fine anyway, and don't tell them that part.
Advantage on death saves is huge. It means you're drastically more likely to stabilize whenever you go down. It doubles your odds of getting a natural 20, so it increases the chance that you're just going to hop right back up all on your own without waiting for the bard to use Bardic Inspiration or the cleric to stop by. And that makes the possibility of getting a critical fail on a death save, which is, when you roll a 1 and get 2 failed death saves instead of just 1 like you normally would, that makes that a 1 in 400 chance. That's great. I'm really enjoying the durable feat already, even without moving on to the next point. But guess what? There's another part of this. This feat keeps going. It doesn't just end there. It adds the speedy recovery feature, which states that as a bonus action, you can expend one of your hit dice and regain that number of hit points. This is a bonus action that you can do every turn as long as you have hit dice. Guys, this is a budget, repeatable second wind.
I would argue this is better. I mean, I'm assuming second wind is going to come in at second level, so you can start enjoying it sooner if you are a fighter and if they leave that class feature alone. But really, when I'm using second wind, it's to keep myself from flirting with 0, right? It doesn't matter how many or few I'm getting, it's that I'm trying to stay in it. And being able to do it, this is 4th level, 4 times per long rest is a pretty big deal to me. Because last time I checked, 4 was more than 1. A 4d8 is gonna total out to be better than a d10 plus 4 most of the time, and I'm happy about that. If I'm going to play the kind of character that would take advantage of a class feature like Second Wind, I'm wanting this feat. Oh, and I said D8. It's not necessarily D8. It's whatever your hit die is. I'm just thinking in terms of the classes I normally play. It could be a D12. You could be the Barbarian. It could be better than Second Wind.
As someone who very frequently plays Paladins, I'm already seeing this being a default 4th level pick for me because I usually use point buy. I can leave an odd numbered ability score in Constitution at 4th level. I can take durable to bump that up to an even numbered score, get a couple extra hit points, get this advantage on all of my death saving throws to make sure that, even if no one's looking out for the paladin can look out for themselves. And as a paladin, I frequently find myself using the healing resources that I want to use on other people on myself, and also having very few things to do with my bonus action. So this solves both of those problems for me, because now I can save my lay on hands for the rest of the party, and I can top myself off most rounds, expending my D10 hit die to keep myself up.
That's hard to argue with. And yet, this is probably not going to be something that I take all that often. As we said back in the Feats episode, I like doing stuff with my feats. And if I'm in the position where I'm taking advantage of the defy death aspect of this feat, I've already done something wrong. And that's not a button that I want to push. I like my passive buffs, and the second aspect of this is attractive enough that I would get some use out of it, but there's better feats as we go down.
I feel like you're judging me by saying that you've done something wrong if you need this
feat. No, heavens forbid. But no, I like this. It's way better than the 5th edition version, but it's not appealing enough to make me overlook some of the other options available at this level.
You know what? I think the durable feat is there to give you a little bit of security and a lot of consistency. And in the interest of feats that give you additional consistency, we come next to Elemental Adept. Yet another 4th level feat that will grant you an ability score increase to your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma.
Any mental ability score.
Exactly. Now, this one has an interesting prerequisite in that you must have the spellcasting or pact magic feature. In 5th edition, it merely specified that you had to be able to cast a spell, but there are a lot of ways to gain the ability to cast a spell. Elemental Adept is specifically for those who have gotten that ability as part of a class feature.
Right, and I'm going to assume that maybe some subclasses are going to give us access to this down the road, but it's not something you're going to be able to feat your way into at first level. You have to commit to the bit to be able to get access to Elemental Adept, and frankly, to get your money's worth out of it.
Now, other than the aforementioned +1 to a mental ability score, Elemental Adept is functionally and almost word for word the same as it was in 5th edition. Your elemental damage of a certain type ignores resistances, and any results of 1 when making a damage roll using that elemental damage type are treated as having been 2s. That's it. That's the feat.
Yep.
And I think that might actually have been faster than the ASI.
Well, I will say, not that it's different from 5th edition, but it is worth noting that this also is our first repeatable feat. You can take this feat as many times as you want, as long as you pick a different damage type each time.
Oh, no! I said I was going to mention that, and I didn't.
You didn't. I don't know what I would be playing that would want to take this twice. Definitely not more than twice. But the option's there.
I can't believe that I missed that.
Moving on from there, we come to a new sort of feat. Since we're just going through these in alphabetical order, we are hitting something very different here, which if you've been following our last few episodes of the podcast, you might have seen this coming, but we're about to talk about the epic boons.
All right, now this is where we're going to have to lean a little bit harder on Rob's knowledge of 5th edition, because to my probable shame, I have never read the D&D 5e DMG from front to back.
Plebeian noob.
So my first experience with epic boons was from this playtest material. So I'm not going to have as much to compare these to outside of what I am reading right now as we go through them. Epic boons in One D&D, it seems like, are going to be primarily tied to your class group. And of course, they all have the prerequisite of 20th level. While some of them are universal and can be taken by any 20th level character, there are no other prerequisites other than groups listed here so far.
Right. If there is a prerequisite, it has to do with your group. And notably, we don't have epic boons specifically for the priests group. I just thought that was interesting. There's some that mention mages, some that mention warriors, plenty that mention experts, and I think that's because of this being the packet that they were introduced with.
Right.
But that is a noteworthy omission as we go through, that those guys don't come up.
Well, here is what I have heard speculated, and I believe that it holds true. We have here presented to us only the epic boons that can be taken by these expert classes, meaning we have all of the epic boons that have no prerequisites, and any feat for which an expert would be eligible, even if it is also available for taking by warriors or mages.
So that just means there's no overlap.
Yes, it is interesting that there is no overlap between experts and priests, although I can see there being no overlap between rogues and clerics, so I think thematically it makes sense.
Well, I guess we'll see.
If I had to pick two to not go together, I think it would probably be experts and priests. And apparently, the creators at Wizards of the Coast agree with me.
So, epic boons, once upon a time, were what you got after 20th level. Once you completely maxed out your character in terms of what 5th edition could offer you, the Dungeon Master was encouraged to give you access to these epic boons. They were basically feats that you got after your level progression was done, and they were supposed to be extraordinarily powerful, blurring the line between your character and a demigod. And they fell very short of that to me. The ones presented in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, anyway, fell very short and did not impress me the way that the paragraph preceding them kind of hyped them up. Some of these in One D&D come closer, or they do a better job of it, and some of them fall as woefully short as the ones in 5e did. But these are not presented as options for after your character's done with their level progression. Now these are your capstone abilities. You choose your own level 20 feat from this list, and presumably from others that will be offered in the future. And as we will see as we go through, there are some that you will be very interested in taking, and ones which are just incredibly forgettable. So, with that introduction, let's start going through them.
All right. I imagine that most of these will be pretty quick. They're often short. They're rarely multifaceted.
Right, they're not very complex.
Right. You don't see a lot of bullet points. They give you like a thing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first one, the Epic Boon of Combat Prowess. This one is for the expert group, of course, because that's the playtest material that we've been given, but can also be taken by the warrior group as well. Simply put, once per initiative, when you miss with a melee attack, you can just decide to hit instead.
This is a little bit better than it used to be. It used to be once per short rest. So if you were resting after every combat, it was effectively the same. If you were playing a game where that wasn't likely, then this is a strict improvement. But it's still, you're 20th level. How often are you missing anyway? And it's not turning a miss into a crit. It's not turning a hit into a crit. It's turning a regular old miss into a regular old hit so that you're able to save some face and to do some damage in a pinch. Is it bad? No, not at all. Is it a 20th level epic boon? I don't know.
I do like that it has this increased frequency. I think without it, it would be kind of sad. The old boon of combat prowess to me kind of was. I don't think that you should necessarily expect to get a short rest after every combat. So the fact that in One D&D in 6th edition, you don't have to worry about it. You just get to do it once every fight. I think that if it was any less than that, I would be disappointed. And the fact that it is there makes this okay. Now, granted, there are some others that are way more fun, and if I only get to pick one, I'm probably never going to pick this one, but I at least wouldn't judge you if you did.
And you do only get to pick one.
But I at least wouldn't actively judge someone for taking this like I would for, the old version.
So, skipping ahead slightly to the epic boon of Peerless Aim.
Much skip.
This is the same epic boon, just for ranged attacks instead of melee attacks.
Oof, I may not have mentioned that. Yes, I'm sorry. The Epic Boon of Combat Prowess is specifically for melee attacks. So you have one for melee attacks and one for ranged attacks? Okay, never mind. I'm back to being harsh on these again because now you have to pick one or the other. I feel like you should just be able to decide this attack hits rather than making that distinction.
So the Epic Boon of Peerless Aim is also only for experts and warriors. It also happens once every time you roll initiative. It's also a 20th level feat. The Epic Boon of Peerless Aim used to be adding 20 to your ranged attack roll. Now it gets the combat prowess treatment where you turn a miss into a hit. Notably, though, The Epic Boon of Peerless Aim is a ranged attack. It doesn't say weapon attack anywhere in there. This might be able to apply to ranged spell attacks, making this a little bit more significant. Also, if you have a special piece of magical ammunition, say like Bard's Black Arrow from The Hobbit, hitting with that seems a little more significant than hitting with your regular sword that you were attacking with multiple times that turn anyway. So, while they are the same at a glance, I think the Epic Boon of Peerless Aim actually edges out combat prowess and is a little bit more attractive to me.
Right. And it makes sense that you should be able to aim well with a spell. There's no reason to limit that feat to weapon attacks. Just like, interestingly, the Epic Boon of Combat Prowess also does not specify that it must be made with a weapon attack. They both merely differentiate based on the distance, based on whether or not it is melee or ranged. Yeah, I think I would say generally, just the fact that ranged in general is better than melee in general would have been fine to make me think of Peerless Aim as a preferable option. However, you got a melee build, you make do.
Okay, sorry for throwing us off kilter. They're just so similar. I wanted to go ahead and get them out together.
No, that makes sense. That makes good sense.
We can move on from there to the Epic Boon of Dimensional Travel, which is this time exclusive to the Expert and Mage class groups, which will allow you to cast the Misty Step spell for free, one time, until you roll initiative or take any kind of rest. Other than the little initiative blurb, this is exactly the way that it worked in 5th edition, when you got it after 20th level.
You want to know how I feel about this one, Rob?
Yes, I do. I hope it's bad, because I kind of feel bad about it.
Okay, bonus action teleports are really good. I love the Misty Step spell. The fact that I get to cast it with this once per initiative or once per rest, or, kind of, I guess, both-ish, using this Epic Boon for free is good. I like being able to do that. Does it make it worth a 20th level feat? Probably not. But you know what makes this really disappointing for me? Is that Astral Elves can already do this 3 times for free per long rest under the name Starlight Step. And Eladrin can already do a better version of this called Phase Step once per short or long rest, starting at 1st level, and at 3rd level, it gets extra benefits. The weird thing is, this epic level boon states not just that you get to teleport 30 feet as a bonus action, it says that you cast the Misty Step spell, which means that unlike Phase Step and unlike Starlight Step, this feat can be counterspelled.
Yeah, and it can also cramp your style as to what you're doing with the rest of your turn, what actions you are allowed to take, unless they change the way that spellcasting works in 1D&D. It's a step down, and this is something that we're going to see with a lot of the epic boons. Is there anything wrong with it? No. Is it something that is going to be effective at 20th level and beyond? Oftentimes, also no. At 20th level, I have more spell slots than I know what to do with. Having spell slots to spare is not a problem. Having the ability to move around the battlefield is not a problem. If I got this at 4th level, if this was one of the 4th level feats, this would be wonderful. Are you kidding me? This would be freaking great.
Oh, it'd be crazy at 4th level, yeah.
But at 20th level, the game has just moved on. People hit me up on Twitter or in the Discord if you feel that I'm wrong. But this is underwhelming when we are fighting archdevils and when we are facing down Terras and threats of this level. And when I am capable of so much more that I have achieved through my normal class progression. You've handed me the ability to mimic a 2nd level spell every now and again. I cast 9th level spells now.
Well, maybe that's something that didn't change from 5th edition. Disappointing 20th level features. Some of these are actually pretty good. Believe it or not, I hate to sound like I'm coming down on all of them, but come on. 5th edition does not understand what players want at 20th level, and apparently that just hasn't changed.
They called it the Epic Boon of Dimensional Travel. Make it Dimension Door, and let's talk. Make it Plane Shift, and let's talk. Then you would get my attention. Then we would be on the right level of play.
Oh my goodness, yeah, Plane Shift would be crazy. Honestly, Dimension Door would be good too. That's at least a 4th level spell that you can do that often. That seems pretty good. It takes your action, but the distance is crazy.
And you can take someone with you.
That would have been good. We should be writers at Wizards of the Coast.
Okay. Anyway, so far, I'm not excited.
Said every player ever.
We've gone through 3 epic boons, and I'm not impressed. Let's go on to the epic boon of energy resistance. This has no 5th edition counterpart. This is a new one. This is something we're seeing for the first time, and it is for the experts and the mages in 1D&D.
Per this feat, you gain resistance to one of the following damage types of your choice. Every damage type but force.
and
force
physical
and
damage
bludgeoning,
types.
slashing, and piercing, of course, yes. But it's all the elemental damage types plus necrotic, poison, psychic, and radiant. And interestingly, this grants you the ability to reselect that type every time you'd finish a short or long rest. This one is interesting.
So, a little bit up, a little bit down. There were old epic boons that would give you immunity to specific damage types, as well as the ability to cast a spell thematically tied to that damage type. Boon of the Fire Soul, Boon of the Stormborn, and you can imagine what damage types went along with those. This is just resistance, not immunity. However, that versatility, that adaptability, makes it an attractive prospect again. If you are taking on the Cult of the Dragon and you know that you are taking on a green dragon in the morning and a red dragon at night, and you have time to take tea in between, then this is wonderful. So, yeah, I don't know. This one's not bad compared to the ones that have come before. It requires a little bit of management, but being able to make my resistance a moving target, I like it. It means I can be resistant to almost anything, depending on the day.
Or depending on the time of day, really. The morning, afternoon, and night, you can change it to whatever you want.
True.
You know, I kind of like this one. I mean, I know it's not the best, but, I mean, this is one of those things where if you know what you're getting into, you can get a lot of mileage out of it.
And I mean, it is being handed to experts and mages. Mages, I think, could mimic this with, what is that early level spell they get?
Oh, you're thinking absorb
elements,
where you use your reaction to...
Yeah, I mean, you could get a taste of this early on. Barbarians, depending on their totem, could be resistant to most of this stuff from pretty much the get-go. But offering this specifically to experts and mages is a pretty good step. I think there are games where I would take this, especially if we had a lot of unfinished business at level 20.
Plus, I mean, it's completely passive. Like, it doesn't require your reaction like Absorb Elements does. And this would be fun to combo with maybe some races that already have some of these damage resistances. I'm thinking of, say, Aasimar, who are already resistant to Necrotic and Radiant. And then you just add in another damage type, maybe something like Fire or Cold that actually comes up a lot more often. I don't know. It just feels interesting. I like having options. I like being able to reselect options. That's why I am so excited about prepared spells in 1D&D and the way that works. And this just seems like more of that. I bet that we're going to find some epic boons that are stronger, but I don't know. So far, out of the ones we've looked at, this is probably the one that I would take.
This is like choosing your loadout going into a Call of Duty match or something, right?
And I like doing
it's just
that.
Prep work. It's a little bit of a video gamey aspect creeping into my D&D, but it's in a way that I like, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered previously how I generally am in favor of design that allows me to prep for a situation and thereby be better equipped for it, which is, the one thing that I didn't like about the changes they made to how Bardic Inspiration worked in 1D&D is the fact that I couldn't make a game plan and go ahead and distribute my Bardic Inspiration pre-combat to where it's sitting in the pockets of the rest of my party members. I'm a prepper, so I like this. Anyway, I think that we've gone over this one enough just about the ways that it can be used and how excited we are about it. I think everyone understands how it works. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
The Epic Boon of Fortitude. There is no difficulty understanding this one. It is plain and simple. Your hit point maximum increases by 40. This is consistent with what we had in 5th edition. However, in 1D&D, they give you an extra little cherry on top that whenever you regain hit points from any source, whenever, you gain additional hit points equal to your con mod. No more than once per round, but it means you are more receptive to healing than anybody else out there. If this had been the tough feat, I would not have been giving it so much shit in our feats episode. This is good. At 20th level, 40 is not nothing.
Yeah, this one's pretty effective. 40 hit points is basically like saying, here, your capstone ability is that you retroactively get the tough feat. Which, I mean, if there wasn't another feat that already did this, then it might be kind of cool. But because the tough feat already exists and I can take it at first level and then just ride it all the way to 20th level, it would have been a little bit underwhelming. Like, the old 5th edition Epic Boon of Fortitude was underwhelming because the tough feat existed in 5th edition also. This little add-on is really good, as is the fact that you could now take the tough feat and this, which I guess you could have done before, but there is additional benefit for doing that. It's not just taking the tough feat twice.
See, the tough feat, when you're down at low levels, having an extra hit point or two is incredibly dull. But here at 20th level, when things are dealing so much damage to you at a go, 40 hit points matters. I would rather have a tool in my tool belt earlier on in the game to kill my enemies rather than to save my life. Now I have all the tools I need to end things. I just might need an extra turn to do it.
So, Bardic Twinspiration generally in favor of the Epic Boon of Fortitude. Moving on to the Epic Boon of Irresistible Offense. This is a feat that is for experts and warriors, and simply states, you know what, we usually tried not to read things verbatim on the podcast, but I'm just going to do it because it's so darn short.
It's one sentence.
The damage you deal always ignores resistance. Period.
Right, so no qualifiers.
No qualifiers on what damage type that has to be.
Now, it does say that this is exclusive to experts and warriors, so your arcane arsenal from the mage classes and the priests is not welcome here. But the bard, being able to pick up magical secrets and raid other people's spell lists, I can see this being a good pick for them especially. That means all their different damage types that they have access to can ignore resistance. Doesn't help you with immunities, but you are always dealing all or nothing. No half measures anymore.
The part of me that wants to put this on a paladin is sad. It's sad now. I very much like the way that this is worded. It's so simple. It's so broad. But when you put it to me that this only applies to experts and warriors, those guys are probably wielding magic weapons, and almost nothing is resistant to the damage of magical weapons anyway.
At least not in 5e, yeah.
I mean, it's a fraction of a percent. So, it's so cool, but does it matter?
By the time you're 20th level, if you're not wielding a magic weapon, you've done something wrong. And if you're fighting things that aren't resistant to that, or aren't immune to that, then something weird is going on. So, on the surface, looks good, sounds good, but certainly for martial classes, maybe a less attractive option. That's why I like adding it to a spellcaster like the Bard, because then it starts to make a little bit more sense, getting into those elemental damage types.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I think the Bard is really the class that could benefit from this. Not only just benefit from it the most, but just generally, really the only class that's going to get a lot of mileage out of this, because if you think about it, the Rogue is just going to be dealing magical physical damages, and the Ranger does get to be a prepared spellcaster, but they don't get to take evocation spells.
Yep.
So their damage is primarily still going to be coming from their weapon. So I love it. Don't know if it's actually useful enough to take. Like, I can't see a character that I built and took to 20th level having the problem that this needs to address.
That's kind of the issue, yeah. That's what I'm saying. A lot of these feats, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just coming in too late. They're coming in when they're not really relevant anymore.
There would be no reason to do this, but if it said ignores resistance and immunities,
done.
Sign me up. It's the feat. It's the one I'm taking as every character at 20th level.
And that's probably why it doesn't say that.
Well, and it wouldn't make thematic sense for
the Epic Boon of Irresistible Offense to actually be irresistible.
Right. I mean, if there's something that's immune to necrotic damage, it should still be immune to necrotic damage, Anyway. Moving on to the Epic Boon of Luck, which is expert group exclusive.
Expert exclusive. I like that. If you're familiar with the Epic Boon of Luck from 5e, this will seem very familiar. When you roll a d20, for any reason you would roll a d20, roll a d10 if you would like. Might help you out. Might not, but it might. Once you use the benefit, can't use it again for a while. You do get it back when you roll initiative, which is sooner than the short rest, long rest from 5e, which is kind of a bit of a theme here. A lot of the epic boons coming back, making sure you can use them when you fight, which I like. But a d10 to a d20 test, I mean, that's not going to turn a miss into a crit. It's not even advantage. It's just trying to tack on a number. Frankly, the epic boon of Peerless Aim and combat prowess are kind of showing this one up in terms of attacks. I guess the big feature for this is that it can be used for saving throws.
Yeah, which is exactly where I would use it, because I basically am viewing this as a use of Bardic Inspiration, right? Because that's kind of how a Bardic Inspiration that you had in your pocket would work in 5th edition. I mean, if you had a mid-tier Bardic Inspiration pocketed, you could use it in these situations.
Mid-tier is a damning word there when we're talking about 20th level, though.
Right. I mean, it is on call, and you do have the ability to use it when you want it, rather than when the bard feels like blessing you with it. I do like that you have it when you roll initiative to the existing rule of getting it back on a short and long rest, but I would have felt so much better if it just said add 10.
Yep.
I would have felt better if it said add 5, rather than leaving me the chance to roll a 1 on this thing. It's good-ish, I guess. I'm never going to be excited to take this in general, unless I was just trying to fulfill a character concept of the guy who can't fail, which, is funny because he's probably spent a pretty good amount of his time failing getting here. But it does seem like a thing that is thematic to expert groups. I feel like they got better things to mitigate their failures on the way to 20th level than this capstone ability.
Strong agree. I can't see any of my characters taking this. Certainly not any of my experts. So far, the word epic in front of all these different boons has been really a misnomer to me. None of them have seemed that epic to me.
Well, apparently their 5th edition versions did not claim to be epic boons, and they should have just left it that way.
As it,
they just claimed to be boons.
I mean, they're all under the epic boon heading, but yes, that is somewhat more soothing to see. Now though, Steve, we are moving on to what I think is genuinely a good one.
We got a couple of good ones, in my opinion, coming up, so let's go ahead and move on to the epic boon of the Night Spirit.
So this one's for experts and mages, spellcasters, bards, rangers, you know the deal. When you are in dim light or darkness, you can become invisible as an action, and you stay that way until you take an action or a reaction. Do I need to explain why this is good?
No. If we've learned anything from our One D&D Ranger class review, it's that Steve likes going invisible. Even though this requires an action, it's expending 0 resources other than that to do it. All you need is time, and you will become invisible. Even though this is pretty much how it worked in 5th edition and how it's going to be working in One D&D, it's nice that they specify that you remain invisible until after you have done something.
Yes. So this gives you the opportunity to make that sneak attack, do whatever it is you were planning to do before revealing yourself. You get whatever advantage that invisibility would have conferred on you, but the 2 exceptional parts about this are, as you said, it takes nothing out of your class, it just takes your action. You can do this as often as you want, number 1.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't recharge on initiative, it doesn't recharge on short rest, it doesn't recharge on long rest. Anytime you are in darkness or dim light, you're gone.
Yeah, and dim light is crazy pervasive, by the way. Like, the situations that the DMG classifies as being dim light are broad.
And you stay that way. Whether or not you stay in that dim light or darkness until you take an action or a reaction. You could stay that way all year if you don't take an action or a reaction. Certainly all the way through a dungeon, certainly all the way through a party. You don't have to stay still. You can be moving. You don't have to stay in the dim light. You don't have to stay in the darkness. You just have to be in there long enough to take your action, and you're golden for as long as you want.
Oh, whoa. See, I thought the coolest part of this ability, this feat, was the fact that it had no duration, but you're right. If they keep it exactly as it's written, you can just go.
Right.
Like, you can turn invisible just before sunrise and stay that way all day.
As long as you don't do anything hard, you're good. You can stay that way as long as you don't do anything hard. As long as you don't spend an action or a reaction doing anything. You can use all the movement you want, interact with anything that you want, any bonus actions that you want to use. You are golden. This is so good. If I'm playing an expert or a mage, I am seriously considering this one.
You know, I will say the one thing that tempers this for me slightly is how many more actions 1D&D has. Like, Jump is an action now. Search is an action now. Study is an action now. Hide is an action now. You might still need to hide while you're invisible. Invisible isn't as broken outside of combat as maybe sometimes I feel like it should have been. People can still find you. And if you take the hide action while invisible, weirdly enough, you're not invisible anymore. So I think that this is a crazy good feat for rogues who get to do all of those things as bonus actions. They can dash, they can hide, they can do most of the things that you would want to do as your action without actually using your action.
Now, look, even if you do need to use your action and do something and risk being discovered, all you have to do is get back in some dim light and you're a ghost again. Because, again, it's not a consumable resource. It is always, anytime, every time you want to use it, you can.
Oh, yeah. I understand. I said that's the only thing that tempered it slightly. This is still, I think, probably the strongest choice that we've come to so far. I'm going to take that back. This is easily the strongest choice we've come to so far.
I'll go ahead and say, nothing that we will discuss after this will excite me as much as this. I think this has the most potential of any of the epic boons. But let's see if you agree as we go on. Next up is the epic boon of recovery. Anybody that makes it to 20th level can have this feat that will allow you to use a bonus action to regain half of your maximum hit points once per long rest. Without waiting for the cleric, without waiting for the bard, without waiting for the druid, without waiting for anybody, you get half your hit points back as a bonus action. Take that, durable feat.
Well, it's kind of on theme with the durable feat, isn't it? You get to use a bonus action to regain some hit points, and also, kind of like the durable feat, it helps you modify your saving throws. Specifically, the epic boon of recovery states that you succeed on every death saving throw that isn't a natural one. I liked the durable feat, and I like the epic boon of recovery. This is my second favorite out of all the ones listed, coming in just barely beneath the Night Spirit one, just because I think that's more fun. But the epic boon of recovery is really good. I mean, if you're not playing a rogue, this might just be better. Like, the epic boon of the Night Spirit can be taken by mages, but the epic boon of recovery is probably better for mages, I would think. Depending on your kit, of course.
I think the main mage that's going to get use out of that is going to be some warlock who can sneak into the shadows and vanish, right? Yeah. But everyone is going to get big use out of the epic boon of recovery, especially the high hit point classes like paladins and barbarians. They literally stand the most to gain from this feat.
I bet you that barbarians are the only reason why that doesn't say regain hit points equal to your hit point maximum and specifies that it has to be half. But man,
this is good.
I mean, that's going to be terrible when you're editing this clapping. It's going to be the worst. But it's great. This is what I think a 20th level feature should look like. I would say, please take note and have other classes be able to get abilities like this, but that's my 5th edition brain working, because all classes in 1D&D can pick this as their 20th level capstone.
It is good. I will not fault it.
It's all downhill from here, in my opinion. We've already covered the one that you're most excited about, and what I think is probably the best one, so let's see what's left.
Well, next up is my personal number 2, the epic boon of skill proficiency. Just based on the name, want to guess what this does?
Yes, I think it would make you proficient in a skill.
That's a good joke, you say. Tell again is funny. No, this is unchanged from 5e. You get proficiency in all skills.
All skills. And because this is an epic boon, meaning you can only get it at 20th level, that's an extra +6 in every skill.
So this is one of them that I really thematically am into, as one of those things that's transitioning you from mere mortal to nigh divine, that you suddenly are good at literally everything you turn your hand to. Maybe not perfect, but good at everything. And you know why it is so good? Because rogues can take this. And they got reliable talent 10 levels ago.
Meaning that a skill with which they were previously non-proficient, they now have a minimum of 16 prior to applying any ability score bonuses. A minimum of 16, which, per the playtest material that will eventually be the Dungeon Master's Guide, all skill checks should have a baseline of 15. So you can do most anything, as well as someone who is trained in it, regardless of what you roll on the die.
Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you.
It's funny how I'm viewing these all in terms of how a rogue would use them, even though there are other expert classes.
Well, rogue is good at using skills, so that's why we're bringing them up here. But this would be good for anybody, especially, again, I like succeeding at things. I like being good at stuff. And this makes me good at everything. I think this is an appropriate reward for being at 20th level. Nobody else is getting a taste of this earlier on. Even if you took other little feats to give you a proficiency here and there, this is just across the board blanketing every skill. Not every tool, but every skill. And I think that's wonderful. That's appropriate at this level of play.
I agree in principle. I think this is a pretty decent 20th level capstone. Now, you did mention that you said no one else gets a taste of this earlier on. I don't think Bard should take this, because they have Jack of all trades, and they're already halfway there, effectively. But, I mean, that's not really a mark against the epic boon of skill proficiency. It's just, one of the classes in the game is not going to get as much mileage out of it as everyone else is. And then, of course, in the case of rogues, someone's just going to run the heck away with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same way with the epic boon of recovery. The barbarian is going to get more use out of it than the wizard, but they're still going to get use out of it. And I think that's the same way for the bard. The bard's not going to get as much use out of it as the cleric, but they're both still going to get use out of it.
Sure. As far as theme is concerned, this is a weird one for me to say that, my character is suddenly good at literally everything they lay their hand to. I think the way that you put it, where this is some sort of pseudo-divine ability that you've achieved, is really the only way to narratively explain being as good at the ranger at survival, and as learned in arcana as the wizard, and as versed in religion as the cleric, and as strong as the fighter. And the list can go on, but I think you see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's hard to justify that from an agnostic sense. I think you have to get divine power involved in some way as you are pushing 20th level as any class, because you are entering that realm. You are in that conversation now. Anyway, I like that one a lot.
Moving on to the next one, we have the Epic Boon of Speed, available to experts and warriors. Your speed increases by 30 feet.
Good, clean, simple.
That's it. Simple. Now, I do believe that when it states that your speed increases by 30 feet, that, as far as I've been seeing it throughout the playtest material, that is specifically referring to your walking speed, your movement speed. It does not specifically apply to climbing or swimming speeds. However, I do note that most of the times when a character gains a climbing or swimming speed, it is equal to their speed anyway. So it's probably a moot point. Gotta go fast. Rooma zoom zoom. Arriba arriba. Meet meet.
I was going to say, I think the way that it's written in the class features for the ranger and the thief, they would be able to enjoy this for their climbing and swimming speed. But this is an epic boon. This is a 20th level thing. Most characters are probably going to be doubling their speed here. Again, rogues get to do so much. Being able to move, dash, and bonus action dash, they be zooming, man. This is going to be a worthy addition to somebody's character sheet. If you like going fast, this is the way to do it. There's not a better way to do it. It's probably not going to be one that I take, but it's solid.
I'm doing some math over here on my other screen of some stuff that you can do with the rogue, and thinking about some different classes that you could take this with if they don't change anything. It gets nuts fast. Like, real fast.
Just fast.
Rogue Tabaxi, or is it Thief? Yeah, Rogue, Thief, Tabaxi, taking their movement speed plus an action dash, plus a bonus action dash, plus another bonus action dash.
Yeah, right.
Using the Tabaxi's feline agility, or whatever it's called, that lets them go Rooma zoom zoom. Yeah, it gets bonkers. Like, there's a new Sonic the Hedgehog build, and it incorporates this for sure. That's with no items, no spells. It's a little ludicrous. Like, that is your build.
I don't think speed is going to win you any combats or anything, and so I see this as effective, but not overpowered. I mean, and if you were overpowered at 20th level, I guess I wouldn't mind so much. But man, like reading fairy tales and whatnot as I do, there's so many that have a precedent of the race, or the race against the daughter of the gods, or the race against the gods of speed themselves and whatnot, and
Sure.
Or races against the personifications of the four winds. And this is so cool. Like, if imagine challenging someone to a race and then turning this stuff on. Oh man.
Yeah. Now, here's the weird thing about this, though, because this is the first one that we've looked at that I feel like has taken a marked step back from how it was written in 5th edition. Because in 5th edition, not only did your walking speed increase by 30 feet, you also got to take a bonus action dash or disengage once per rest. And that is notably missing from the 1D&D version.
It is. Frankly, I don't care about that so much, because they did open it away from the walking speed, and I think it's going to give me better modes of travel in more directions, in more mediums, and across different surfaces. But, I mean, yeah, you can't deny it's missing, but I don't think it was necessary to give me what I wanted from it. It may sound weird, but I'm happier with this version.
Right. I think it's fun for a meme build, but I think it's gratuitous at that point, because experts and warriors are already the ones that are getting the bonuses to their movement speed anyway. You're already going to be the fastest member of your party. I feel like this is just winning more. It's not solving a problem, and it's not giving you a new toy to play with, really.
All right.
Moving on to the epic boon of undetectability. This is available only to expert groups. Now, this one gets pretty crazy. Real crazy, real fast. It simply states that you can't be seen or heard by any means, be they non-magical or even magical, while you are hidden.
So if I'm a hiding person, which as an expert, if I'm a ranger or a rogue, 2/3 of the people who can take this feat, I guess artificers eventually, but half of the people who take this feat are going to be hiding now and again, perhaps quite often. And currently the only way to get around that is magic. Being able to shut that down is beautiful. We already had an epic boon earlier on that made you invisible. That is solving one problem. You cannot be seen by conventional means. This doesn't replace that, but while you are hiding, if you go ahead and bother to hide, and while you fulfill all the conditions of remaining hidden, you hide the best. You hide so that no one and nothing can detect you without physically sitting on you and discovering you're there. And even then, they're going to have to scratch their heads and think about it because they still can't see you.
So, as I look over this, I'm realizing that I might like this even better than the epic boon of the Night Spirit. While the epic boon of the Night Spirit will allow you to become invisible and stay that way indefinitely, which is crazy good, there are still ways that you could be detected. You can still be heard. You can still be perceived.
Anything that can see invisibility could see you.
Right. Anything that can see invisibility can see you. Blind sense is still a thing. Tremor sense is still a thing. The only thing that is going to be able to detect someone with this is tremor sense.
Or reaching out and touching them.
Right. Reaching out and touching someone. And the ability to achieve the hidden condition, that bar is pretty low, especially for expert classes. The ability to be completely undetectable is just crazy good.
This is a worthy contender. This is a good level 20 epic boon, no doubt. It doesn't replace the other in my heart because you have to remain hidden. And we have very specific conditions for what that means now as we get into the glossary of this document. And the freedom to not remain constrained by them makes our previous boon attractive to me. But if you fulfill the conditions and are hidden by these means, it is certainly more effective, just perhaps less versatile.
True. You do have to set up the hidden condition and you do have to make the check. However, there's a lot of things you can do with your action while hidden that the epic boon of the Night Spirit would not allow you to do without becoming uninvisible. Of course,
oh yeah,
it's probably easier to step back into a little patch of shade than it is to reset up the hidden condition. But given all other things being equal, I think that I would probably take this one.
I would probably take the other. But the fact that it has to come down to a decision means that these are both good. And it's sad that we could only take one of them as our Heidi character, right? That we have to make that choice. But that means that we've made two very good things, or rather, Wizards of the Coast has made two very good things if we are pained by that choice at all.
I'm really glad that they have a couple of different options that are just really good. And depending on your particular character and your play style, you might choose one or you might choose the other. I hope that we have a similar selection of empirically very good epic boons for the other class groups.
Frankly, I'm surprised we have so many options already, and we definitely haven't even seen all of them. They're putting a lot of work into capstone abilities, these epic boons that so many people are probably not going to see because they're locked behind 20th level and no campaigns last that long.
Maybe One D&D will give us a big favor and add quicker level progression. One can only hope.
Anyway, I think we've only got one more. Finally, we have the last epic boon, the epic boon of the Unfettered. For the experts and warriors out there, they can now take the disengage action as a bonus action if they couldn't already, and when they do, it also ends any grappled and restrained conditions on your character. So, grappling is probably going to be fairly common now with the way that they changed unarmed strikes and making the grappler feat more appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to take the disengage action as a bonus action as any expert or warrior, not just the rogue, is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 20th level material, clearly, because the rogue got it at level 2, but it is good. And ending grappled and restrained conditions, also good. It doesn't smack of 20th level epic boon to me, but there's nothing wrong with it if that excites you, or if this is something that's coming up in your campaign and happening to your character a lot and it's frustrating you. Now you have your answer.
Here's the thing about this one for me. It's not exciting.
Period.
It is actually really good. The ability to automatically, no check required, no waiting till the end of your turn, you just use your bonus action, and you are disengaged, and anything that was grappling or restraining you. The restraining is pretty big, right? The ability to end any of those as a bonus action as often as you want, anytime it comes up, as many combats as you get into, whether or not you rest, doesn't matter. You can just spend a bonus action and it's over. The fact that you can use your bonus action not only to end the grappled or restrained conditions, which come up pretty often, but you also automatically disengage, meaning that you can break free and run. You can Houdini and skedaddle. Just offer a bonus action as often as you want. It's a good epic boon. It just doesn't smack of fun.
It's not sexy enough. It is not sexy as an epic boon.
Right. That's kind of the problem that I'm seeing here. The thing is, this does not add fun to your character. What it does is prevent your fun from being taken away. And that's a weird and interesting distinction. I don't hate this one. I don't know if I could convince myself to take it, because like you said, it's just not as sexy as some of the other ones. But, it's good. It does a lot for very little cost.
I can't argue with that. It is good, but it could be better. And other boons are, and I'm more inclined to take those.
We're going to get a lot of mileage out of that line.
Yeah, at least something good came out of that movie. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the epic boons, and we have so many feats still to cover. So I think it's probably best to go ahead and call it an episode right here.
I agree. I was really thinking that we might be able to tear through these in one, but you know us. We like to talk. It's pretty much the whole basis of the podcast.
I think maybe next time we can sit down and chew our way through the rest of the feats. For what it's worth, we'll try and go faster, but man, we're not even halfway through.
Guys, there are 50 feats covered in this playtest packet. This document alone, there were some more that we still haven't discussed all of from the first playtest material that was released, but just in this one, there are 50. I think we've covered about 19 of them. I could be wrong. I could have miscounted. But don't worry, we're going to take care of the rest of them in our upcoming episode. In the meantime, did we miss anything when we were covering these feats? Do you strongly disagree with our critique of some of them? Which was your favorite, both out of the 4th level feats and the epic boons? Very curious to hear what your takes are.
Yes, what was your favorite epic boon, and why is it the epic boon of the Night Spirit?
Hey.
Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, Reach out to us on Discord, hit us up on Twitter, come find us on the internet, and let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback on these topics and on our episodes in general.
If this is your first episode and you're just tuning in to hear all of this new stuff that's coming out as Wizards of the Coast begins to preview One D&D, the upcoming 6th edition of the game that we all know and love, make sure to go back and take a look at our last couple of episodes where we've been going through the classes introduced here. We've made several references to those episodes throughout this one, and they're definitely worth a listen. We quite enjoyed making them. Hopefully you'll enjoy listening to them, and they'll help tide you over until we conclude this conversation about feats in our next episode of Bardic Twinspiration.
If you enjoyed this episode and wish to hear more like it, please consider supporting us on Patreon or on Anchor.fm. You can also support us by using code TWINS10, that's TWINS10, whenever buying dice or other premium Dungeons & Dragons products from MistyMountainGaming.com. Or just by sharing us with your friends. If you'd like to join the conversation, please join our community Discord, or reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Links to all of that below the episode. And hey, in case you don't hear it anywhere else this week, we love you guys. Till next time.
If it matters to you who signs in each time, I can check out our rogue intro. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bardic Twinspiration. Thanks for coming back as we continue to review...
Yep.
Sounds like
that
me.
Sounds fast, so it's not me.
Well, Well, I also sped it up.
Yes, I recognize this difference in our cadence regardless of acceleration.
When we speed you up, it's like easy listening.
Yeah.
And then when you speed me up, it's like,
What
what the f*** did he just say? Must be Italian.
What, you think one day we'll ever release a video of this?
For that, I would have to put on pants. Moving on. Oh, I definitely could have gone into... I thought we were trying not to talk about how bad the 5e version was.
Yeah,
but yes,
and then you brought it up.
Including contested checks.
I was going to let it slide, and then you brought it up. I asked you to let it slide, and then you brought it up.
When you make the extra attack of the light weapon property, which is again... well, you know what? I'm gonna try to sum it up without...
Did you not hear that?
Nope.
Discord must be really good at...
Discord's pretty good. Discord's pretty good.
It's awful. Car. When I say car, it's 18-wheelers, by the way.
Highway 9's popular now.
Scenic crossroads of East Alabama. So says the sign.
Now a 4th level feat, which requires proficiency with any martial weapon.
There's that weird proficiency with any martial weapon again. Who are you for? What do you want? Why are you here?
It's to keep sorcerers from wielding 2 short swords. Sound effect is just an example of our commitment to accuracy, whether or not we get it right the first time.
And join us for the 4th time, as Steve and I will be back to talk about the rest of the Expert Classes One D&D playtest PDF very soon.
Yes, we can't wait to bring you the next topic for discussion in this playtest material, where Bardic Inspiration will be featuring, well, feats. The outro music you're listening to right now is called Mega Epic, and the intro music is called Super Epic. Both were composed by the wonderfully talented Alexander Nakarada and utilized under a Creative Commons license. If you enjoyed our content, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review on your listening app of choice. To keep up with us on social media, look us up on facebook.com/Bardic Twinspiration and on Twitter @BTwinspiration. Want to interact with us directly? Come join our Discord. After all, who are we if not people who are willing to roll the dice on making some new friends? Links in the description. Come check it out. Here's the thing that I thought as I was going through the Bard and the Ranger. I looked at their packages. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, there's a blooper for you. And to those people, we're sorry. We didn't write this stuff. We're just reading what's on the page.
I'm seeing that fella from South Park. We're sorry. Sorry.
Sorry.
The BP oil guy? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. From level 1, big shocker, we progress to level 2. Level 2. Sorry, that was a bad joke. You coughing is actually funnier than the gag you were about to do.
Gasp. When will you learn that all my ideas are good ones?
Is that a Star Wars reference?
Dude, it's Emperor's New Groove.
That's right. I'm editing that out, but tequila's good. I want a constitution skill called just get crunk and just be able to have a proficiency in partying.
Get crunk? Like you mean like get crunk? I'm pretty sure that's crunk.
I said crunk.
I'm hearing crunk, like from the Emperor's New Groove again.
You've just got that on the brain.